What's up, everyone? Today we're breaking down a legendary game by Bobby Fischer, where he shows what might be the best opening for white against beginner to intermediate players. In this match, Fischer faced Ojar's Cella, and what's amazing is that it feels like Fischer is personally answering the question. Bobby, what opening should I play against opponents at my level? His answer? The Evans Gambit. This game perfectly demonstrates why it works so well. When you're playing against lower-rated opponents, the key is to attack. Players under 1800 often struggle to defend accurately, and Fischer knew exactly how to take advantage of that. Going all in with a strong attacking plan is often the best approach in these situations. The Evans Gambit with pawn to b4 is actually a great way to launch an aggressive attack. Even Stockfish, the chess engine, confirms that this opening is sound and offers white good chances. After playing b4, we immediately attack the bishop, while also preparing to push our b-pawn forward to chase away the knight. As expected, black captures the pawn, and we continue with pawn to c3, gaining an extra tempo for our development. Players who are not familiar with the Evans Gambit often retreat their bishop back to c5, but that's a mistake. Doing so allows white to play pawn to d4, seizing control of the center with another tempo. In the actual game, however, black played bishop to a7, retreating to safety. Theoretical lines usually recommend bishop to a5 as the main move, but we won't dive too deeply into that here. I want you to focus on the overall attacking style, the key plans, and the common ideas behind this opening. Next, white plays pawn to d4, taking full control of the center. Black responds with pawn to d6. Now, if black had captured on d4, white could simply recapture, maintaining strong central control. This would also give white the opportunity to push forward with their central pawns, driving away black's knights and creating active play. Even after pawn to d6, Fischer decided to exchange pawns on e5, trading in the center to open lines for an attack. Of course, since white is down a pawn, trading queens would make no sense here. We're not aiming for an endgame, we're going for a direct attack. In the Evans Gambit, one of the most common attacking themes is to target the f7 square, which is often the weakest point in black's position early in the game. White's light-squared bishop is already aiming at this square, and the classical follow-up is queen to b3, which puts additional pressure on f7. In this position, that move would indeed be powerful. There's no easy way for black to defend the pawn, and pushing it forward would expose their knight. So already black's position starts to feel uncomfortable. However, Fischer found an even stronger move, queen to h5. From here, the queen not only attacks the pawn on f7, but also targets the pawn on e5 simultaneously. Black is forced to respond with pawn to g6, but that immediately allows queen takes e5, winning the pawn and attacking the rook in the corner. Black can't even defend by moving the bishop, since it's pinned to the king. Black tried to defend by playing knight to f6, and here Fischer came up with another brilliant move. At this point, white has already regained the sacrificed pawn, so the material balance is equal. But the attack is far from over. Black's main goal is to castle and bring the king to safety, while Fischer's goal is to stop castling and keep the pressure on. One possible idea would be to play bishop to h6, controlling the key square and preventing black from castling. However, that move would allow queen to d6, offering a queen trade and leading to an endgame, which is not what we want when we're attacking. Instead, Fischer played the brilliant bishop to a3. This move does several powerful things at once. It pins the bishop on a7, making it impossible for black to castle without losing it. It controls the d6 square, preventing the queen from coming there to challenge white. It increases overall pressure on black's already cramped position. After bishop to a3, it becomes clear that black is already in serious trouble. They can hardly move any piece. The bishop on a7 is pinned and cannot move. The king cannot castle or step aside, or the bishop will be lost. The knight on f6 is tied down, as moving it would leave the rook undefended. The queen is forced to stay on guard, protecting the pinned bishop. Just a few moves into the game, Fischer has completely paralyzed black's position, all thanks to precise development and relentless attacking pressure. If black tries to move the king to escape the pin, they actually walk right into another one, this time along the diagonal. That would also blunder the knight, since it becomes pinned and cannot be recaptured. White can simply take the knight, simultaneously attacking the rook in the corner. At this point, it's incredibly easy for white to continue developing the attack, because black's pieces are almost completely restricted. To relieve the pressure, black plays rook to f8, unpinning the rook and allowing the knight to move on the next turn. White calmly castles, bringing the king to safety and connecting the rooks. Now black plays knight to g4, trying to chase the queen away to untangle the position. The queen retreats to g3, keeping control over key dark squares. Black then trades bishops on a 3 and follows up with queen to e7, reaching a critical position. Despite being stuck with a king in the center, Black's position isn't immediately collapsing, but it's very difficult to find a good plan for White here. Most players in this situation would probably play knight to b5, since the knight is currently under attack and that move also creates a strong threat against c7, supported by the queen. At first glance, this looks like a powerful idea. However, Fischer understood that this move isn't as strong as it seems, because Black can simply respond with knight to a5, defending the c7 square, attacking White's bishop, and preparing to push the knight away on the next move. At first glance, it seems difficult for White to continue the attack. After all, Black can defend with pawn to a 6 or pawn to c6, pushing the bishop back. But Fischer found a brilliant and mysterious move. Bishop to b5, giving a check. At first, it looks strange since Black can easily block the check, but Fischer's idea was deeper. He wanted to force a pawn move and weaken the dar6 square. After Black pushes the pawn forward, Fischer continues with knight to c4, immediately targeting d6 and preparing knight to d6 check to restart the attack. In the actual game, Black didn't capture the bishop, because if they had, then after knight to d6 check, the king would be forced into a dangerous walk. For example, after king to d8, Fischer could play rook to d1, bringing another piece into the attack and dominating the open d file. The X-ray threats along the file would leave Black completely exposed. Instead, Black found a strong defensive move, queen to e6. This allows the king to stay on the e-file and move to e7 after knight to d6, avoiding the open d-file. Even so, the position remains tense. Both Fischer's bishop and knight are under attack, and he must find the right continuation to keep his momentum. Fischer now played another bold and highly creative move. Instead of defending his attacked minor pieces, he calmly brought his rook to the open d-file. Normally, developing a rook to an open file is standard, but here it's extraordinary, because Fischer was actually sacrificing his bishop to do it. Perhaps Black expected the obvious continuation knight to d6 check, planning to move the king forward and stay in the game. But Fischer had something far deeper in mind. He first inserted the brilliant queen to c7. This was the entire point of bringing the rook to d1 earlier. Now White suddenly threatens a back rank mate, either rook to d8 or queen to d8, forcing Black to defend immediately. Black responds with bishop to d7, covering the file, but that allows Fischer to continue with knight to d6 check. The king is forced to move again, stepping into the open, and we reach another tense position. White has successfully exposed the king, but Black is still holding on, ready to defend with moves like rook to c8, even if it means giving back some material to survive. And just when it seems the attack might be fading, Fischer unleashes another brilliant sacrifice, knight to f5. He gives up the knight to rip open the e-file, delivering a discovered check against the king and reigniting the attack with full force. Black couldn't afford to ignore Fischer's knight sacrifice, so in the game, he decided to capture it. However, there's an amusing alternative line worth mentioning. If Black had tried to retreat the king back to e8, Fischer had a brilliant tactical fork ready with knight to g7 check. At first glance, it's almost shocking. How did that knight even get to g7, where normally the fianchetto bishop would stand? But the tactics make it all work out perfectly. In this scenario, the king can't move forward either, because rook to d6 would pin the queen and win it soon after. That's why Black had no choice but to accept the sacrifice, though the position remained incredibly sharp and complex. In fact, Fischer was so proud of this masterpiece that he included it in his famous book, My 60 Memorable Games. It's a perfect example of his creative, attacking style, reminiscent of Mikhail Tal and other old masters who weren't afraid to sacrifice everything for the beauty of the attack. After capturing, Black countered with rook to c8, a strong defensive move that also brings counterplay. Credit to Fischer's opponent. For an amateur, he found several resourceful defensive ideas throughout the game. Now, you might wonder, why doesn't White simply capture the pawn on f5? The reason is that Fischer's sacrifice wasn't about material, it was about opening the e-file for a deadly attack. If queen takes f5, White's attack rolls immediately. Instead of rushing with rook to e1, Fischer found the most precise move, queen to d6, cutting off all escape squares for the king and keeping the rook on f8 under pressure. Now, if the king tries to retreat, White can fully exploit the open e-file, forcing Black to cover. But that only delays the inevitable, as Fischer finishes the attack with a beautiful checkmate, using the pin to perfection. Thanks for watching.